The following is a fan-based review. We claim no ownership to the material being discussed other than our own opinions of what was watched and what we think.
Alright everybody, welcome to this week's episode of the Tokucast, episode 3. My name is Marcus.
I'm Matthew.
And this week we'll be talking about our first Kamen Rider V3, 1973. We mostly do this because of the pun, the fact that this is our third episode.
You texted me to request to do this episode specifically for the pun's sake.
Well, yeah.
I was perfectly okay with continuing to do Super Sentai for a little bit longer, but we had a great, one of the first comments on our first episode, which I'll be looking up now to give him a shout out, told us that we should probably go back and forth just to keep it fresh. And he was right. It's just that how conveniently this pun worked out for you, Marcus.
Hilariously. I'm so excited. And I'm just so happy the fact that we can go ahead and actually do this one. Now, V3 being our first Kamen Rider, we will be doing these ones just a little bit differently. Since there's no giant robot, we're mostly going to be talking about the bike in place of that, along with some other things, considering the fact that there aren't that many characters to go around this time.
And the ones that are there don't stay around for very long.
Mm-hmm. Now, this is our first show that's also a direct sequel to the previous one. To start off in episode 1, we end up seeing Riders 1 and 2. For those of you who don't know, we don't end up doing the shows that aren't fully subbed. Kamen Rider, the very first show, isn't fully subbed yet. But with this show, this starts off as a very direct sequel to Kamen Rider. It starts off with our new Rider, who also ends up playing some future Tokusatsu heroes, Kamen Rider V3.
Right, and before we really get into V3, first I'm going to give one fair warning. I have been sick all week. I will not be talking very much, and you can probably hear how sick I am right now. Mm-hmm. So please excuse me for any sniffles or coughing you may hear. We will try to edit them out as best we can, but if we can't, I'm apologizing in advance. And also, shout out to Kevin Alford, who was our first comment on our first episode, and he gave us some really good advice, some really good thoughts, some good compliments. We really appreciate it, man. Hope you're still watching. Hope you're still listening. Mm-hmm. Can't wait to hear from you again.
Yep. All right. So the actor who ends up playing Kamen Rider V3, Hiroshi Miyauchi, also ends up going on to play several other heroes later on. Some of you may know him from Go Ranger, as Owl Ranger, from Jakku as Big One, from Kaiketsu Zubat, and as the General in Choudenshi Sentai O Ranger. But he's we'll get more to his character study at the end of this. I like the fact that we have someone. It's so different coming from Sentai to Kamen Rider this time around, because we end up having basically just one person to focus on, and we end up learning a lot about this character throughout the entire thing. And I think that really helps just give us a sense of direction and purpose with at least the earlier Kamen Riders versus some of the earlier Sentai. And in this case, we just have the one rider, technically two, but not really as much as, say, some of the more recent and modern ones, such as Ghost, where they end up getting introduced fairly quickly. It's mostly just, it's later on, at least in this series case. But we start off with the episode Rider number 3. His name is V3, with a murder.
Yep. Or do you mean murder or attempted murder?
Murder.
Oh, no, you're right. Murder. Sorry.
It was complete murder. A person melted in the very first episode.
God, I love the 70s when you could get away with that kind of stuff.
Yep. People and I noticed this going from both Kamen Rider and Sentai, the early ones, even into the 80s. They just murder indiscriminately. There's no hope. Like, a lot of people each episode end up dying a lot more. But in the first episode, we end up meeting, Kamen Rider V3 outside of his suit. Outside of his suit, we end up meeting him. Apparently, he knows both Kamen Rider Ichigo and Nigo,
which was not very clear to me, mainly because I haven't been very familiar with the first two Kamen Riders, because it's not fully subbed. So I spent a good half of the episode asking which one of you is V3, because these are very three prominent male characters that are, talking. They're being the center of the action, they're being the center of the plot. So I have no idea who the main character is. I don't know if the guy because V3 sees this murder and his life is perpetually threatened afterwards, and they're trying to keep him safe.
Because no one can see what Destron does.
Right, ever. And I'm just sitting there wondering, is that V3? Is one of these two guys? And then...
Well, I mean, you already know what Kamen Rider Ichigo looks like, though.
Not out of suit, not back in the 70s. I know what he looks like now, but...
He doesn't look that much different.
But it was also like 7 in the morning.
Yeah, sure.
I got up and was getting ready to go to work, and I was not in the most of open mindset. So I'm just like, which one of you do I have to pay attention to, and which one of you gets me through this episode?
But yes, the main character who actually ends up playing V3,
right.
His name is Shiro Kazami. He's a great, great person throughout the entire show. I loved him. But he ends up knowing, Ichimonji and Rider number 2, because they end up working at the same college that he does. Everything is still good on their end. After they defeated Shocker and Gale Shocker, they end up basically going back to their normal lives. We're going to go ahead and put that in quotations, considering the fact that they still know of other organizations that they end up having to fight against. In this case, it ends up being an organization called Destron. And Destron, it seems like a lot of the earlier writers, I'm in the middle of Amazon at the moment, a lot of the organizations, I should say rather, aren't that different from each other. I like how they all try to go ahead and just target Tokyo right off the bat. There's no, that's always the basis of operations, and I get that. That is the capital of Japan. They're always going to try to go after Tokyo. I just think it's pretty funny how it's almost always go after Tokyo, try to destroy Tokyo, try to kill everybody in Tokyo, and take over that and use this as our basis of operations to go ahead and get everything else done. But in the very first episode of V3, Shiro Kazami ends up seeing that one guy end up getting killed, melted, whatever.
Damn.
And so they end up hunting him throughout the rest of the episode. He ends up going home at one point, and we end up meeting his mother, his father, and his sister. And this is after a little bit of another girl getting attacked and seeing a different Destron mutant throughout the beginning of the show, and she ends up being found by V3. Everything ends up being honky-dory for about 5 minutes right before the fact that he ends up bringing her back to his parents' house. Everyone in his family ends up getting murdered. Straight up murdered. I'm sitting here like, wow.
We're talking, this is the Japanese Kamen Rider version of Batman here.
Basically. Except, he has a sister. He's not rich. But yeah, it's like everybody ends up, his family just ends up getting murdered. And he ends up getting attacked. He gets out. And then later on, he ends up getting injured. Kamen Rider 1 and 2 end up taking him to this place. He was doing a bike riding. Like, he was on his motorcycle riding around. And then they injured him or something, so they took him back and tried to rebuild him. And they did that into V3, into the special lab location, which also ends up getting blown up. So it's like all of that ends up happening just so quickly in the very beginning of the episode. But in regards to some of the more recent ones, I feel like this had a very good beginning.
It did. I did like the beginning. I thought once it was more clear to me, I thought this was, because it wasn't clear to me when I started watching it was a direct sequel, I was liking the beginning for 7:30 in the morning, but still. It helped bring you in. Like, even if you didn't know Kamen Rider, even if this was your first Kamen Rider, you could still know that's Kamen Rider 1, that's Kamen Rider 2, and this is the new one. They have helped make this one, and he is out for revenge. Mm-hmm.
That's basically his entire motive throughout the rest of the series. He's just angry throughout a lot of it. I mean, it's understandably so. They killed his entire family. So he's understandably extremely angry at Destron for trying to go and do that. So we end up meeting 2 of the monsters pretty early on, with Jaguar Monster and the Turtle. The Turtle Cannon guy.
Oh yeah, doesn't he come back a few times later in like team ups and Kamen Riders, Kamen Rider movies and stuff?
He's pretty prominent. He ends up coming back. It's really weird. Apparently, V3 ends up beating Jaguar, but with the Turtle, apparently Kamen Rider Ichigo and Nigo can fly, and they take him out into the middle of the ocean and he explodes a la Batman in Dark Knight.
Thank you. Go back to Batman.
It's just like that ends up happening so quickly, and we don't end up seeing Nigo and Ichigo basically throughout the entire show. And I think
aren't they presumed dead?
They're presumed dead, but later on we end up finding out, some other things about them. But for a little bit, it's basically just V3 versus Deathstroke.
Which I know that's the formula, but I feel like they threw away a great opportunity of at least having one of the previous Kamen Riders being some sort of a mentor to him throughout the show, especially since his primary motivation is revenge and not seeking justice. He's not. It's not only for the people, though it's a plus for him.
Yeah.
He wants revenge, which could have made some great plot points and character development.
And it sort of does.
It does, but someone else there who goes, you have to remember why this is your job.
Mm-hmm.
This is for peacekeeping, not for your selfish gain.
And we do get that person. We get that person in Tobei Tachibana,
right,
who was also a helper of Kamen Rider Ichigo and Nigo, and he ends up being a main character throughout a lot of the other seasons as well.
Yeah, I just felt like it would have been better coming from a Kamen Rider, and also the 26 secrets that even V3 doesn't know. Somebody there to teach him those secrets as opposed to learning them on his own.
Yeah.
But that's just my preferred story method.
Yeah. And we do end up getting, speaking of those 26 secrets, we end up getting a few of them later on. Some of them aren't labeled and show, actually a few of them we only end up getting to see video game-wise in like Backyard War Genesis, where some of the other ones we actually end up getting to see, like the ice and the gliding muffler, which he never ends up using in show. But other than that, I think it's a good thing they sort of weren't there. At the same time, like going opposite of what she said, because of the fact that he had to learn all of this by himself. There were some instances of things that we don't see in Rider anymore. We actually see this person training to try to get these other secrets learned instead of it being given to him, a la, I don't know, Grateful sort of in Ghost and drawing formula.
Right.
But it was really refreshing going from the more recent Rider to the older one, seeing the fact that this person had to train for everything that he had to do throughout the rest of the show.
As opposed to being a handout.
As opposed to being, just given to him like Aka Ninja and Ninja.
Oh God. We will. Let's not talk about that. But speaking of what you just said, going from the more recent things to this. There is a downside to that, because I had to catch up on Ghost and Zyojin. Going from that, and then going from that to 1973, production-wise, quality-wise, is hard.
It is, and I'll give you that.
Watching the fight scenes in V3 got hard at some points. The moments, like, it's not even the slow movements, it's when the movements
don't connect.
Thank you for knowing what I was going to say. When the fist is 2 feet from your face and you're reacting,
they do it a lot more with kicks.
They really do.
I noticed that.
I think it's because kicks are, speaking from a fight choreography standpoint, kicks are a lot harder to control.
Yeah.
So, as opposed to punches.
Yeah.
And I get that. And not to mention every move has to be big and grand and cheesy and God, why? So it's even harder to control then.
Yeah.
So
stunt choreography ends up being a lot different than versus now.
Which is why I think a lot more Kamen Riders and even Sentai nowadays have been more pertaining to weapon-based combat
instead of martial arts-based combat.
Because weapon-based combat's a lot easier to choreograph, especially when you're just swinging around a stick.
Yeah. But getting back to the actual show, a lot of the beginning is just, this monster ends up going out, they end up coming back, and I've noticed this with V3, for the first couple of episodes, they introduce 2 monsters at a time.
Right.
It's never just one, and I thought that was great. That's something that we don't really end up seeing anymore. So it technically makes every episode a 2-parter, but at the same time it doesn't, because each time he's fighting against a different monster. And just pertaining to this, I see how this show was so violent really early on. It's so much different. Just the censorship from 1973
was non-existent.
Basically, that's what we got at Amazon.
And look how well that worked out for Amazon. But we'll get with that in the next Kamen Rider review.
Mm-hmm. But it's like we end up having that show, and the next one And it's just so different going back and forth, just the amount of violence that we end up seeing. Like, there was one episode where he ends up fighting a rat. And speaking of the monsters, it's like a monster's name plus a weapon or a thing. And I just thought that was one of the most hilarious things because it was constant. And that made it such a good thing to me.
Let me ask you this.
What?
What was better, that or manga?
Look, nothing will ever beat Monger from Sun Vulcan. Nothing can ever beat Monger from Sun Vulcan. That was amazing. Everything is Monger. But
Monger.
It was just like, and this is pertaining throughout the actual rest of the show as well. It's just a name plus an animal plus a weapon, or an animal plus a thing, like Scissors Jaguar, or Turtle Bazooka, or TV Fly.
Oh, right, TV Fly. What the hell was that?
But it was just, because those first couple ones, it was always a monster, like two monsters get introduced, either one at the beginning or one at the end, and they were always, working together to try to get something done until the commanders ended up coming in later. We end up getting one episode where I believe it was a rat and something else, but the rat had a flail on the end of it, and Kamen Rider V3 breaks that thing off and then breaks the guy's arm. And I was like, this is amazing. Because it's very rare nowadays to end up seeing a Kamen Rider use the enemy's weapons against them.
Yeah.
It's very, very strange to end up putting that in there just because of where we end up seeing that thing happening. We rarely ever end up getting to see that anymore. Just having the monster's weapon used against them. And I think it's something that we can attune to them, considering the fact that they didn't have like nearly as much of an arsenal to work with versus like someone like Ghost or Drive or Gaim or something like that. They didn't have multiple weapons.
To be fair, it can be argued that V3 has one of the biggest Kamen Rider arsenals of all time.
With his 26 secrets.
Yes. Now, arsenal may not mean weapons, but he's like Dio from JoJo. He's got lots and lots of tricks.
Yep. Dio has all the tricks in the world.
Wrong show.
But
wrong show. Sorry.
Yeah, wrong thing. But coming in just a little bit later, we end up getting some of the other generals coming in.
Right.
We get Dr. G, who some of you may know as Narutaki ends up playing him in one of the Decade movies. Because he's coming right to Decado. This guy's coming right to victory. And I loved him because it's just like, I freaked out so much when I freaked out so much when I first saw Dr. G though, because I was like, oh my god.
He's back.
It's him.
It finally has context.
And I was so happy the fact that we got context. Dr. G ends up coming in episode 13. I liked a lot of his plans. Because it seemed like, he was the first one. He ends up coming from Germany to come back to Japan to end up fighting everybody. And it was just so strange, just, having, not just to mention context for Narutaki later on, but just having an actual general, in charge of people. And the fact that they were so ruthless. If you failed, you died. Don't be anybody in Shocker or Destron because you just end up being murdered. If you're a grunt, run. That's basically how it is.
That brings up a question. Are the grunts in Shocker, are they people or machines?
They're people.
Don't volunteer, people.
Yeah, that's how you die. But
okay, hold on. That means, I'm sorry. They're people, which means that they are either being told or willingly going, hey, constantly.
Yep.
See, that's why I always thought they were just monsters in bad suits, because there's no way in hell a person would do that willingly, even when they're getting hit.
No, it's basically just them. But,
all right,
speaking of Dr. G, he ends up being there the longest throughout the generals in the series. And I think that ends up helping a little bit, just because of the way that these things end up happening. Dr. G is a very cunning and very ruthless general of Destron. He ends up coming in. A lot of his monsters end up getting killed, but he always ends up having a backup plan, either in the form of another monster or he ends up introducing two at the same time. A little bit into the series itself, apparently he's a mystic of some sort because he can resurrect the spirits of the dead, and he ends up bringing back the 4 generals from Shocker.
Oh. Right.
Yep. That was a very, very fun time. just because he ends up bringing back Colonel Zol, Dr. Shinigami, Ambassador Hell, and General Black, who were part of Shocker and Gale Shocker that Ichigo and Nigo ended up killing. And I say killing because they died. But it was really strange just seeing the fact that these were the prior ones to what we had before. We never ended up getting to watch the show, so it ended up just being that much more different. But they ended up coming back in episodes 27 and 28. They end up capturing V3. And I noticed this V3 gets captured a lot, but it's usually almost always on purpose.
That's another thing about this show. No one's really stupid.
Yeah.
Like, usually with these kind of shows, the villains' plot are stupid, convoluted, and idiotic. But these villains are smart.
Yeah.
I love how it's a common thing when a Kamen Rider in this show finds their base. When they finally get there, everything is destroyed and deserted. I just love how that's it. I love it. It was even in the last episode. V3 finds the base, jumps in, and goes, "Damn it, they're already gone."
Yeah.
I'm just like, okay, where did this go?
Everywhere else except exactly where he wanted it to go. But it's like, I like the fact that everybody in this show was smart. And you know what really helped it on V3 side, and we haven't really talked about it that much? The Rider Scouts. I'll give this to them. I thought that was a great system, just having someone
Out
everywhere.
But not children.
Even the children. Like, I didn't really care that much, because I think they considered them a little bit unassuming, like, even though after a little bit, Destron ends up figuring out that it is always the Rider Scouts that end up doing this, but they were always end up being very, very smart people. With, they always had someone out there. If Destron was doing something, chances are a Rider Scout was nearby to be able to report it to the main headquarters, where it's totally touching.
I mean, it's a good plot point to just so that way the viewer can know how the Kamen Rider art knows about the situation, as opposed to like seeing it on the news or something, where usually if that is the case, it's already too late. But let me ask you this, because we had to skip this show due to subbing. What do you think is better, Rider Scouts or Computer Boys and Girls?
Look, Computer Boys and Girls.
For those of you who are confused, it was Goggle 5. We had to skip it because there's no full sub version anywhere. We'll get into the reason why later, when it's finally subbed, maybe. But the base has a bunch of attendants on computers that are children.
The Computer Boys and Girls.
That is exactly how the Minotaur says it. Computer Boys and Girls. So, which we always just thought was hilarious. Just to give you some context to that joke.
But I feel like the fact that this is the last season that we really end up using the Rider Scouts. And, of course, they end up going a lot more by the wayside later on, considering the fact that, cell phones end up becoming much more of a thing.
Yeah.
But I like the fact that they were there. They were always willing to help out with V3 no matter what.
Oh, yeah.
I think that, said something about their character. The fact that they're children, but they're willing to put their lives on the line to make sure that this evil organization does not get its plans to go through.
Nope.
And I just think that's a very strong thing that... I know they're a remnant from Rider 1 and Rider 2, but it's just the fact that I really like the fact that they had this network to use throughout the entire thing. And that was just a really good part of V3 that I really liked.
Yeah, it was pretty good.
But getting back to the actual story, Dr. G ends up bringing in the dead colonels from Shocker and Gale Shocker for one episode, basically. They capture V3.
Again.
V3 is just like, haha, I knew you were going to do this. And then he breaks out. He ends up basically getting them all killed by collapsing the entire place on top of them. I was like, V3 is sort of ruthless. And I like that about
Wouldn't
him.
you be in this case, though?
Yeah,
He's got the motivation. It makes sense.
Yeah. So he ends up basically collapsing the entire thing on top of them after they find some shocker monsters that he also ends up killing later on.
Yep.
But after that, it's like Dr. G is just done. He has to get his plans to go across from now on because I get the feeling that the Death Strong leader ends up giving up on him. Because it's just like, you got these people killed, I put them in your care, and you got them killed almost immediately. Congratulations, I'm done with you. And he ends up transforming into the crab monster.
Yep.
And, of course, he ends up getting killed as well.
Much later, but...
Yeah, that he gets killed in episode 30. The other journals died in episode 27 and 28. He ends up getting killed in episode 30. And I get the feeling that at this point, V3 sort of didn't know exactly what it was going to do, considering the fact that after this, it's like each Baron that we end up getting only ends up lasting for about, the next two at least end up lasting for about 5 episodes each, and the last one ends up lasting until the end of the series.
Right.
The next one that we end up getting after the Baron Dr. G, Kamen Rider V3, is Baron Fang. And he's from Africa. He's the second general and the leader of the Fang clan. And just going from one to the other, I like the fact that they had some background notes that they kept in the show. Each one of the Shocker, Death Strong grunts after that, they ended up using a different weapon per the Baron that they ended up having.
Right.
I thought that was just a very good thing. Like that was just a little. I like technical stuff like that, just to keep it consistent. And I love it when they do things that are technically considered background, but it's just like you notice it no matter what throughout the rest of the show. And I loved Dr. G because he was a very compelling villain. Every time he came onto the screen, you were just like, he is right there. All your attention is drawn to him, not just because of his crazy accent, not just because of Kamen Rider V3, but just like he had that level of confidence. He was always very cool and collected, at least up until the very end, when he ends up having to turn into a monster himself. Crab Laser, by the way, that is the name of that monster. Crab Laser. We are back to labeling things as an animal plus an object. It was just sort of jarring going from him because he was there for 17 episodes, and then we ended up going to Baron Fang from the Fang clan. And he was okay. He didn't end up really leaving that much of an impression on me.
It's hard to leave an impression when you're following Dr. G.
Yeah, it's true, and it really doesn't help that he was only there for 4 episodes.
It also doesn't help that we've known Dr. G from all the Sentai, the common modern day Kamen Riders, where he shows up for like Superhero Tyson, Kamen Rider Tyson, and so we're used to this character. We've been enjoying this character already, and then
we're getting somebody that we have no clue who he is,
and then he's just gone.
Yeah.
So it's just like with a lot of the problems with Battle Fever. They weren't there long enough to make an impact.
Yeah, and I think one of the biggest problems with him, I mean, he's from Africa. You would think that with how large Africa is, his Fang clan would be huge.
Yeah.
But it's like 3 people. 4, technically. But I was thinking, like, are you serious? And then he's there from episode 31 to 35. And then by the end of 35, he's like, by the end of 34, he's like, my entire clan has been wiped out. And so you're like, how do you only have 4 people in your goddamn clan? What is happening to your clan that there's only 4 people in it? And then
I'll tell you what's happening. Battle Kenya.
Oh yeah, Battle Kenya was there. Just murdered everybody. That's what you get for being Kingioba. Trying to go against Kingioba. Nope, you can't. You die. So that's a good passion.
He called all the other Kenjiobas too.
Yeah. But it's just like, and then he ends up dying in episode 35 after being turned into Vampire Mammoth. Or Vampire Bat, one of the two. It was really weird. He was Vampire.
I don't remember, but God, I hope it was Vampire Mammoth.
He was Mammoth.
Good God, that is the worst name so far.
Yeah, that was bad. And then the next one, it ends up being Archbishop Wing, who is bird-based. His entire clan is bird-based. Apparently, he is from the northern part of Russia. It was also just really, really weird how he ends up coming in and his clan gets wiped out. We all know how big Russia is. And his entire clan is getting wiped out. But the thing is, his entire costume was based on a bird, right?
Right.
And please explain to me why, when he transforms into his monster form, that it ends up being a bat. Nope, there's no explanation.
No, there's really not. There's really, God damn it, that was so awful.
Yeah. It's just like, that was one of the weirdest things. Like, I get that all the rest of them are all based on birds, vultures, things like that, condors. But he was a bat, but his mask was based on a bird. It had feathers and everything. And I just thought that was one of those really weird things that they really did not know what to do with that. that was weirdly hilarious. And then the last one that we end up getting is Martial Armor, who sort of made an impression. He was there for fairly long. He was there from episode 40 to 52. But at the same time, not really. I sort of wish that he did a little bit more as well. All of his monsters were all based on like armored monsters, rhinos, and things like that. And V3 did have some issues trying to fight them. But V3 being V3, I was gonna break it through that. I just thought it was just, we end up running through these last two barons or generals fairly quickly, and then we get this one who ends up being there from the very, very end. When I feel like when you don't make that much of an impression versus somebody like Dr. G, why are you even here? And that's sort of the problem I have with V3, with a lot of the monsters being sort of forgettable or something.
I don't like the idea of recycling generals. I like what Sentai does, where you see all the generals by episode 1, and you just slowly watch them get picked off. Especially like what they're doing with Zyuohger now, where you see all the generals, and one of them can barely put himself back together.
He did, though.
So I like that idea more, because it gives that, when you see the generals and then you see the monsters that the hero is fighting, you know that there's a level above them. You know that there is something stronger than them, then there's something stronger than that, and that gives the hero a goal to work towards, essentially, with steps.
At the same time around this time that this Baron actually ends up getting introduced, we end up getting introduced to our technically fourth rider.
Started off as a secondary rider, became Kamen Rider number 4, Riderman.
Yeah. Who... I have a lot of issues with him being considered a rider, and I know some people have, opposite issues of mine, but it's just like, he does not seem like a rider to me. He was not really all that strong. He got beaten up by a lot of the mooks, and he really couldn't even fight any of the monsters themselves.
Well, he's not as strong. He can't be as strong as V3
because he's not a cyborg.
He's not a cyborg. He's a guy, and isn't that even any kind of augmenting like suit? Is it augmenting his abilities at all?
I think it gives him like a slight power up. He has the arm that transforms into a whole bunch of stuff.
Exactly. He's but like other Kamen Riders, because I mean, look at Ghost. There's no freaking way that Tenju Takeru can fight by himself at the beginning of the show, and then he gets the suit, and then he can fight.
Well, and then he gets murdered, and then he gets the suit.
And then he gets... my point! He can't fight! Thank you! He gets murdered. My point. He is a guy. That is the point of Riderman. Riderman is to show that even somebody who's not a cyborg can still fight for justice.
As long as you chop your arm off or have it cut off, and you have something put on there.
Shut up. But you understand my point. You don't have to be the $1 million man to make a difference. You can, even if it's just being a rider scout, you can always help and make a difference. Because it's 1973, and everything must have an after-school special, and yay, the world is peaceful.
But at the same time...
Let's murder everybody. At the same time, let's murder everybody.
He did end up defeating the, some of the other... not by himself, of course. He ended up having V3's help.
Right.
But he did end up defeating Martial Armor near the end of the show. And we'll also end up saying this because he was the first one who technically sacrifices himself.
Yep.
There was a giant rocket that was about to destroy a lot of Tokyo. So he goes on and actually not disarms it, but he ends up piloting the rocket away.
And blows up.
And it explodes.
And that is why he gets the title of Kamen Rider 4, because he may not have been as powerful as a Kamen Rider, but he had the harder one.
But here's my issue with this.
Oh, this ought to be fun.
No, it's not even that. It's the fact that they said that he sacrificed himself to do this, but you want to know what happens? He keeps coming back.
Yeah.
And now he's a ghost.
Valid point.
He constantly, I think the next time we'll see him is stronger. He ends up coming back at the end of that show.
They don't explain why?
No, they literally never explain why he survived the rocket when he's legitimately just a man with a machine arm. It's never explained why he gets to get.
I don't think it. Honestly, when it comes to team ups and stuff, I don't think they thought it mattered, because it was more about the fan service. It was less about the story.
More or less. But getting to the last episode, we're sort of just talking about the villains because the villains end up moving the plot forward a lot more than anybody in the show. We will say this, in the episode 30, with the last episode of Dr. G was 29, when V3 gets captured by the rest of, Shocker, Gale Shocker, and Destron, this is basically the last time that we end up seeing Ichigo and Nigo throughout the entire season. Because V3 is trapped in that area where it's like super cold, and next thing you know, you just start hearing this laugh in the background, and fucking, Ichigo just walks out, badass, and just wrecks everybody in there. And then you see Nigo come out of nowhere and just wrecks everybody along with him. It's just like, I love the fact that a lot of this show is just the writers being great.
Seriously. I think it's a theme with early Kamen Riders. With Kamen Rider nowadays, it's the obstacle to overcome, the thing to make me as a writer better, the thing to make me as a writer stronger. Mm-hmm. When it comes to early Kamen Rider, like Ichigo, Nigo, stronger. V3. No, I'm just gonna walk and kick your ass and go home and have some tea.
Yeah, that's basically how it goes. And then let's just get to the end of the show, so we can go ahead and talk about like characters and things like that.
Characters and concepts and stuff.
In the very last episode, we actually end up finding out that the leader of Destron
is under a tarp, and I don't know about you, but I saw that tarp and I went.
Immediately thought Battle Fever.
And then I went, "Say Negos, get the fuck out. You had your time. Your show is over."
Basically.
And then
actually, his show hadn't even begun yet.
Valid point. But then when he was getting ready to pull it off, I was so disappointed because you could set yourself up for a great plot twist right there. Somebody he knows. It may not have made sense with the rest of the show, but it could have been a great reveal.
It's like the fact that it was just a skeleton and a voice recorder.
And a skeleton with a heart in it, and a very bad looking skeleton, and a heart in it, and a voice recorder. And by the way, we go back to Battle Fever. You stabbed the heart, didn't you?
Yeah. But the thing is with that, and this is why I sort of keep mentioning Stronger, the main villain that was from Kamen Rider show, like the first Kamen Rider V3, X, Amazon, Stronger, basically all the way up to ZX, it's the same guy throughout the entire thing. Yeah. It's always him who's controlling all of these evil organizations. Yeah. And it's just like, I thought that was so good, considering the fact that we have like this legacy of this guy always being beaten by always being beaten by a writer. And I just thought that helped the narrative, because the first, basically all the way up through Black RX, all of the shows are connected. That doesn't happen anymore.
No.
And I'm so disappointed.
They're connected, just not in the same way. Like, Drive and Ghost are kind of connected. By connected, I mean they take place in the same universe, as opposed to like with how Marvel is versus DC and all this stuff, and you're like, you want to see these characters meet, you want to see them interact, but sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. But
sometimes they're owned by different companies.
Oh god.
But it's just, I love the fact that there's always this legacy, and I mean we get a little bit of this in Foray, considering the fact that was the 40th anniversary, and like the very first episode they're talking about all these other writers, but it's just so strange considering the fact that from Kamen Rider, the first one, all the way up until Black RX, you end up seeing these writers basically constantly, except in Amazon. All of these shows end up being connected. They all end up having this one guy to fight, and they do eventually end up bringing him down, technically. We'll get into that more when we end up getting to Drive. But it's just the fact that everything is connected. All the writers love to show up in everybody else's show to help out in some way. It's just, that shows that strength, that resolve to, no matter how many times that you end up beating this guy, we're going to keep coming back to make sure that he can't do any more damage.
And that brings up this thing that, like with shows like Kamen Rider, Super Sentai,
Metal
Hero, Power Rangers, these types of shows where every year it's rehashed, redone, with a new face and everything, you forget it's the same show. Mm-hmm. But with early Kamen Rider...
With early Power Rangers.
With what you were talking about with early Kamen Rider, how they keep coming back and showing up. You remember, it's still the same show, mm-hmm. but just different seasons. Mm-hmm. But with Power Rangers, you get that one team up. With Super Sentai, you get the team up.
Well, to be fair, in Power Rangers, those the first couple of seasons from Mighty Morphin through In Space.
Right.
And technically Lost Galaxy, they were all connected.
Yeah, right. But yeah, you're right. I did forget about that. But after that, when they just should, this season and this season and this season and this season with a team up, you just forget it's still the same show.
It's still the same heart at the heart of the matter. And I think
I kind of miss that, honestly.
Yeah, Kamen Rider keeps that encapsulated very well.
That's one thing I did enjoy about to switch to Power Rangers, the Mega Force, the Super Mega Force, was watching 2 different seasons of Listen, don't he's giving me a very judgeful look, and he has all the right to. The switching of seasons, of Sentai seasons, essentially, but it's keeping the same actors we've already known. I didn't say they were good.
No, they're not.
I'm just saying the idea written on paper. Good idea. Execution, Nickelodeon, what the fuck were you thinking?
Bad.
But anyway, oh god, we're not History of Power Rangers. We're not Linkara. Let's move. Sorry about that.
Back to Kamen Rider. So I just love the fact that everything was interconnected throughout a lot of the show, at least at the very beginning, showing that no matter how many years that were taken, let's say from between Super 1 to Black, it was like 7 years before Kamen Rider and coming back, even though we had the ZX special.
Yeah.
It was just it felt like a much stronger narrative throughout those shows. Even though in some case, at least in Amazon's case, they never had another rider show up, but Tobei Tachibana ends up showing up in that show. And speaking of Tobei Tachibana, let's go ahead and get to the
characters. Well, before we get to characters, why don't we just talk about looks and concepts, just to get those out of the way.
I don't like any of the early riders, at least up to Black's looks, because I hate the chests.
Hate the chests, hate the helmets, hate the antenna.
I'm fine with that.
See, with 1 and 2 it worked. V3 it didn't really work for me. But I looked at V3's. So for V3's look.
V3's look could have been being a lot better.
Yeah.
It just, I don't know. I think there's something with the suit design from the earlier ones. They could have done a lot of things with that. Could have just gotten rid of some parts of it. I don't like any of the bulges chest.
It looks like he's about to fall apart.
Yeah, it really did. And I think that was just, a part, sign of the times.
Yeah.
There's not really much they could
do. He looks better when he shows up in the modern versions.
Yeah, he does. As soon as they got rid of the more bulges chest piece, that really ended up helping. The belts are fine.
I like the belt. I love the idea of Kamen Rider 1 and Kamen Rider 2 have these turbine belts that are powered by wind, and then he gets 2 of them.
Yeah, and they end up being,
it's a good logical step.
Mm-hmm.
And I like how his henshin poses were very reminiscent of the Kamen Riders before him.
Yeah.
But with his own little thing. God, I laugh every day.
You're so good.
French?
More or less. But I really liked just going for what he had going for him really worked, considering the fact that he was just like the next logical step of what they had with 1 and 2 beforehand, then moving into this, ended up being a great thing. And I really like that. But getting to the actual character, I loved him.
Oh yeah, he was a great character.
He was funny. It was just like, he had so much confidence in himself, in his abilities, and just how strong he was. It was very, very good considering the fact that he was just extremely overconfident in everything he did. And it showed. He was never outsmarted in that show. And I love the fact that like half of the time, he'll drive off screen after the monster starts shooting at him, and next thing you know, V3 is just behind him. And I love the fact that V3 was always right there. I remember there was this one episode where Jun and one of the Rider Scouts end up getting they end up getting kidnapped, and they're at the train yard, and V3 just bursts through one of the beginning of the train, and it's just like, I'm right here, and he starts beating everybody up. I would say here, like, V3, you are one of the most amazing people, if only because you are consistently hilarious. There is nothing that he did that was just, like, pointless. And I like the fact that he always had a meaning for the things that he did.
Yeah.
It really helped, just like versus some of the other writers, the more recent ones, like Den-O, for example. It was just like he never had that overconfidence amount, like Momotaro said. He never thought that he could be beaten. He was always very realistic in the way that he ended up approaching his problems.
Which isn't a bad thing.
Yeah, and I really did end up helping him,
But let's not go too much into Den-O since we're not reviewing Den-O today.
I know, but it's just like he always had to do something to beat a certain monster.
Yeah.
He always had to either train, he had to monitor. He always ended up having to keep a lookout for these monsters and see exactly what they could do and what he could do to beat them. Because he couldn't always end up beating them. He always ended up having to do something and come with a new rider cake. He either had to find out one of his 26 secrets. Something always had to be done to be able to help V3 end up fighting these people. And I love the fact that he was just so studious. I mean, yes, he was very hot-headed and he had every reason to be, but it's just like he never went overboard in it. And I think that really ended up helping me enjoy this show as much as I did, just because I enjoyed him as much as I did. And I don't know. I just thought he was just such a strong character, and I'm sort of upset that I'm over with the show, but at the same time I'm not, because we have other things to watch.
Yeah.
But it was just good seeing him, like, actually, like, I know of V3 from, you know, team-ups and things like that,
right.
Kamen Rider War, but I never had a frame of reference for why he was the way he was.
Yeah, now you have that context.
And now we know this character. We're pretty, you know, invested in this character. We know exactly what his motivations are, and now we know why he is V3. We know why he is as strong as he is, and I think that just really helps give us some context, and we really hope that to the people watching this, that you go and watch V3 just to see, you know, how this character ends up growing over time.
And if you do, and if for any reason this review does make you want to watch V3, you can find it on the Henshin Justice Facebook page, which is where we watched it, and also for any of the other shows that we review, we usually watch them at kissasian.com. If not, unfortunately, V3 is not available on their website. And any screenshots we use will probably come from wherever we watch the shows. So in this case, probably from the Henshin Justice Facebook page or Kiss Asian. So if any screenshots you see, they'll probably come from that website, just to let that be known.
Yeah, it's just he was such a very, very good. It was a very good actor choice.
Oh, absolutely.
He fit his character so well. He was such that overconfident asshole. I just love how he looked. I thought he was hot as hell. And that comes with the confidence. But
sure it does.
It was just so much fun watching him be V3 throughout the rest of the show.
It was.
And I think that really did end up helping, you know, this is Kazami Shiro. This is who makes his character this character. He's just over the top but in a good way.
Which is really hard to do, to be over the top in a good way. So he's been he has been a good character. And he had good supporting cast. Like
Tachibana.
Yeah, him, the mentor character, he was really good. Can't remember her name. June, she was really good. The Rider Scouts were really good. All developed well. Even if the characters already had history, you still watch them get developed in the show. If this was like us, the first time seeing these characters. So overall, I thought it was a good show. My only problem with the show is got nothing to do with the show. I don't know what the problem was. I really can't put my finger on it, but as I was watching this, I couldn't get as invested and into it as you did. I was enjoying it, but I wasn't like enjoying it like I did Sun Vulcan. I think that it could have been the fact that, you know, for the later half of watching it, I've been sick, and that's been hard. I've had to do overtime at work, so I've had a lot less time to watch it. So it's that sense of I have to watch it as opposed to I'm watching it for pleasure. So, but from a critical standpoint, great show. But I just couldn't get as invested into it as you did, which really does bother me.
Yeah.
I might come back and watch it again later, on a later day when we have more time, just so I can, you know, enjoy it, watch it for pleasure. So.
Because, I mean, this showed a lot of great episodes.
Oh, yeah.
Like,
so the two-parters were... No, I'm sorry, not the two-parters. The 2 parts that you have to watch on Facebook were awesome. Kind of a mood killer.
Yeah.
Episode 1, Part 1, Episode 1, Part 2. It's just...
I hate the fact they broke it up like that.
Yeah,
but that's just a problem with the site itself.
That's just a problem with the site. But just when you have to do that, it's... Watching one episode feels like... Or watching... a whole story arc of 2 episodes felt like we were watching 4. It was so much more exhausting.
Yeah. But getting back to the actual show, speaking of Tokucast,
sorry about that.
I'm almost finished with Amazon now. We'll be doing that after we do our next show, Choudenshi Bioman. But
Amazon will be our next Kamen Rider in a month, 4 weeks from now.
Yes. Choudenshi will be our next Sentai. But it was just really weird seeing Tobe Tachibana. Like, this is really our first instance of having a character span multiple seasons. Because Tachibana is there from the beginning of Kamen Rider to the end of Stronger. And it's just really weird, considering the fact that his character sort of evolves throughout this show. He's a very, he smokes cigars basically constantly. He's always smoking basically constantly. That's
the 70s.
Yeah, and he was always, the backup of his character. And I love the fact that even though this is our first experience, we already have some context because in the very first episode, Ichigo and Nigo already know who he is.
Yep.
And they were like, oh, it's like, even though we didn't watch the show, we know it's like this is someone that has helped them beforehand. And it's just like, okay, so we already have some context for our character. It was just good that he was very take charge of every situation that he was in.
Yeah. No, he wasn't, Sun Vulcan CSM Miami levels of take charge, but that's really hard to do.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I mean, he was a great character too, but it was just like, this is a character who was always out in the field in some way.
Valid, yeah, which you really do not see a lot.
Yeah, and that's sort of a problem in itself. Even though he wasn't the best fighter, I mean, he got beat up a lot. He always tried.
He always tried, and you
got to respect that.
It's like I was saying earlier. The people watching this need to know that you don't have to be a cyborg. You don't have to be a main character to try to help.
And I think that's shown a lot more in this show.
Yeah.
And in Amazon a lot more than anything else. It's like that's when they end up sort of breaking the rule because, as we know, in the more recent writers, no one's a cyborg anymore.
Nope.
It's something either mystical or, in G3's case, something technological.
Yeah.
Or just something else.
Did that start in the Heisei generation, or was that in Showa too?
How do you mean?
The no longer a cyborg. Did that start in Showa, or did that really not start until Heisei?
That really did not start as much until Heisei. I mean, Amazon, yeah, he wasn't a cyborg.
But what about, I'm not just like as a
main concept, that ends up being much more of a thing in Heisei.
Like, cause I don't remember Black or Black RX being a cyborg.
We'll get into that more.
Yeah.
So I'm not gonna spoil that part. But
valid point.
It was like from Kuga on, it was basically like something mystical. G3, as I said, something technological. Kabuto, something technological. But it was just like they
technological and somehow mystical at the same time for Kabuto. But again,
they ended up moving away from this concept of you have to be a cyborg.
I love
to become this.
When I was first getting into Kamen Rider, thanks to the man sitting next to me, I might add, in college, where we met, I went to Katsucon, where there was a History of Kamen Rider panel. And I love the guy who did this. I love his description on the first two Kamen Riders, or I think the first three, how, so the villain's plan was to kidnap a guy, turn him into their super soldier cyborg, and then hypnotize him. Why they didn't hypnotize him first?
Yeah.
I don't know. And then they did it again in the next season because they just somehow don't learn their lesson.
Well, in the next season, I guess we're talking about V3 here.
It wasn't the same thing, but I just the idea of turning him to cyborg and then the logic of let's hypnotize him afterwards.
Yeah.
When we were just saying that these were really smart villains, they weren't in that.
Shocker, not so much.
Shocker, not so much.
Come on, but it was just. It's just very refreshing. It's like no matter what, and I think the Rider Scouts portray this so much more.
Yeah,
this is just you can help no matter what. You don't have to be a Rider to be able to stop this organization, and I just love the fact that they constantly end up showing this, and that's a very strong message that this show ends up showing, and I just love it. I think that's such a great thing to show, just to the masses. You can be strong, but you don't have to be the one always fighting. It's like you can help in any way that you also can. And I love that.
What are those? It's like those World War II infomercials that they played before every movie. It's like, watch the soldier going, but little Timmy can help up just by collecting metal.
Or by buying bonds.
We make fun, but it was literally that. Just that idea of it's like a war and everybody can play their part.
Mm-hmm.
And
it is.
And in this case, it's the war. It's the war to defend humanity.
Yeah, and they do it well. I think that's something that
though
it's something a lot stronger.
Yeah, and though it just kind of Did you just make a stronger pun?
I did make a stronger pun.
I was gonna do it.
This show is full of stronger puns.
You beat me to it. Anyway, I was in the last episode. There was one slight issue, kind of the same problem with Battle Fever. We're done. The end.
I don't think they really did that as much in this time.
Not like it wasn't to the same degree of Battle Fever, but I just remember watching it. The bones fall over, the heart spills out, the juice spills away, and he listens to the recorder, and all of a sudden it's the Mentor and Jew, and they're all staring at the sunset, screaming V3's name, and he's running off in the sunset.
But I think they did that on purpose this time. Because, like I said, it's all connected.
It's all connected, just so they can bring him back. I get that. I didn't think of that when I was watching it. I just thought of, we're done. See you next week.
See you next week when X starts. But
just Stronger was next.
Stronger ends up being after Amazon, and it goes Kamen Rider, V3, X, Amazon, Stronger, Skyrider, Super One, Black and Black RX.
Sorry, because I'm not new to Kamen Rider, but not as seasoned as him. I keep forgetting how many Showa Riders there are.
And how many we won't end up doing, because a lot of them aren't subbed, or in Super One's case, it's subbed by Hong Kong subs, and we can't do that.
We can't torture ourselves like
that's like... For those of you who don't know what Hong Kong subs are, they translate from Japanese to Portuguese to English. So it's not the best translation. But getting back to the characters.
Sorry.
Riderman. I hate the fact that it seemed like he plays such a gigantic part. Originally, he was a Destron scientist who was orphaned at a young age, and he was brought up by the Destron leader. But I hate the fact that he was just so late introduced.
Yeah.
I feel like with how much they sort of played him up to be, they should have introduced that character, at least, if not Riderman, a lot sooner. It's just like, yeah, he's a Destron scientist, he's always up behind a lot of the monsters, but it's just like, he got introduced so late, we didn't even end up getting to know him at all.
Well, let me ask you this then. When did the trend or the tradition of secondary writers really start?
Kamen Rider?
Well, with Kamen Rider 1 and 2, they felt more like a team than a superhero and a sidekick. As opposed to...
Well, I mean, that's how it should be.
No, I'm not saying that it shouldn't, but when you get to modern seasons, when you have things like Wizard and Beast was absolutely a sidekick, let's be real. That teamwork, that the partnership that you would feel from those two isn't really prominent anymore.
So it's just like you're wondering when that sort of became something in the way.
Because Riderman seemed to me like a sidekick. He screamed I can't believe I'm making this connection now. He screamed a Robin to this Batman.
Yeah. But it's just the fact that they sort of treated him a little bit more like a Jason Todd than a Dick Grayson. He was extremely angry throughout his entire tenure at the beginning of the show.
Yeah.
Like the last general ends up turning on him, trying to sort of get him out of the organization, and then the Destron leader, for some reason, even though he proudly raised the guy, tried to kill him. Because I guess, even though it's explained Destron doesn't care about anybody, he just cares about going forward.
Yeah.
And I guess he felt like this guy was sort of holding him back. So he tried to kill him. He ends up getting out. They replace his arm with a cybernetic piece after he gets stuck or something. And then, it gets dipped in acid. And so they just cut off the arm and replace it with a robotic one.
Gets stuck or something. No, that's not violent enough for V3. It's got to be dipped in acid.
Yeah, of course. Fucking better. But it was just like they end up doing that. But I feel like for the position that he had as a Destron scientist, he should have been there from the very beginning.
Yeah.
And I hated the fact that he wasn't. And that sort of bothered me a lot more than I do, seem to admit.
And the reason why I asked that question to begin with is because he just seemed like the first secondary writer.
He was the first true secondary writer.
So it's like it was introduced late in that they learned that we have to introduce this kind of character sooner. Mm-hmm. You got to test it out. They were trying something out. They were trying something new.
They did it in this show. The next time that we end up seeing it is in Stronger with the first female technical writer, and Tackle. And then we don't end up really getting. We don't end up getting, like the actual secondary writer theme doesn't end up really getting started until Akito.
Yeah.
With Gills and G3. So that's the first tertiary writer as well. But it's just like, this.
And then we get Ryuki, who is just like fuck everything.
But it's just like that's a weird theme that you're right. That's something that should be brought up. But it's just he was a Destron scientist. He ends up getting betrayed. He ends up being a lot angry. Well, very angry. He doesn't end up joining V3 at all. Actually, the first couple times they're seen together, they end up fighting each other because Riderman thinks that he can do everything, and I'm sitting here like, no, you're weak as hell. One, and two, it's just like you're by yourself. I understand that V3 has technically been doing this by himself since the beginning of the show, but it's like he always had a support network.
Yeah.
Riderman doesn't have that. He just ends up getting beat throughout the entire thing. Even though there's one episode where they sort of create a Riderman clone, and they end up breaking into a rocket base. This is the episode right before he dies, with that in quotations. That he ends up just breaking in. Like as soon as they started working together, plans started going a lot more smoothly. And it doesn't really help that at least from the beginning. It's just this is Riderman. This is an angry character. We don't really know much about him other than the fact that he was brought up by Destron.
And we didn't have enough time to really learn about him.
Because at that point, it's just like we're in episode 42, and this show is only 52 episodes long, and you're gone through like half of them. He shows up randomly as a secondary.
Yeah.
It doesn't really help that it's just like, he could have been there, but for some odd reason, I couldn't really find a reason as to why he wasn't, showing up until later. I couldn't really find that reason. It could have been something Toy oriented or something like that, but I'm not 100% sure. I just feel like for the little amount of Riderman that we got, it's just like this isn't enough to get to feel or really care about this character. V3 did, like V3 the character did, because he's now Rider number 4 after he dies, but it's not strong enough for me to really like this character.
No, you're absolutely right. He wasn't there long enough. I think it was just because I think he gave him that title of 4 only because V3 thought he had earned it with his noble quote-unquote sacrifice.
But he didn't. At least not to me.
Yeah.
That's just to me.
To each their own.
Yeah. But just...
What do you think of Riderman's suit and concept?
I did not like his suit.
Is it the mouth?
It's the mouth.
Wow, how did I know?
It's just basically the fact that he was just basically wearing a full around hat and a mouth. And that was like, the suit is ugly as hell.
Is it set, he kind of reminded me a little bit, like in terms of concept, not in terms of character. The Incredibles, I'm Incredible with his homemade costume.
Yeah. It kind of didn't look homemade. That's not a good thing.
No. But everything looked homemade in the 70s. That's the sad thing.
Yeah. It's just, I don't know. I felt like his character ended up being wasted. And actually, this is another problem that we'll end up getting into more later, at least in a couple of months. When we get to Live Man, they end up having the same exact problem. Like, legitimately. When we end up getting back to the Sentai at least a little bit more, with Choudenshi Sentai Live Man, we end up having this exact same problem with Green and Black.
Oh, yeah, because I started watching that, and you kept telling me there's 5. You were promising me there's 5 of them, and
they're there. No, they're not. I'm sorry.
You lied to me. But anything else you want to talk about V3?
I really like this show. At least, and the reason I really like this show, as I said, is because of V3 and his support network. Riderman, yeah, he came later. Jojo Yuki, that is his name, but it's just like, he didn't really add anything. At the same time he did, but at the same time he didn't. But I really like V3 the character, and I really like V3 the show just because I like how different it was from going from, modern Heisei with, I've seen everything up from Kuga up in all of those shows, but it's like I've never really watched any other show aside from like a little bit of Black and Black RX. And it's good to go back and see where the show started and what it could have been if we kept some of the themes from then to now. But that's, mixing things with censorship and things like that. But I really like the show. I really like V3, and I'd recommend everybody go watch it. What about you?
Oh, as I said earlier, it was really hard for me to get into it just because of I can't even put my finger on it. But as a show itself, looking at it from a, critical standpoint, an unbiased standpoint, and all that, I thought it was a good show. I thought it was very well written. I thought the story was good. I thought the characters were great. I thought that it was really well developed in terms of the story and the characters, not to repeat myself. It's just that the look of it, the production of it was really hard to stomach sometimes. They were all smart characters, but that last episode where he tears the little speaker out of the wall that's behind the logo, and he stares and he goes, "I can find him with this," and he goes, "Oh look, it's still receiving and it's talking." I'm like, how?
Yeah.
It's like, not. The wires are ripped out of the wall, and there's some moments. There are moments like that just kind of kill it.
It's like it sort of just forgets what it is.
Like, I understand willful suspension of disbelief, but when you just forget, how electricity works...
Especially at that damn time.
Yeah. It's not a wire... The Bluetooth's not invented yet.
Yeah. But I love how the fact that it was like, no matter what, V3's antennas knows any electronic signals. And it always knows where it is. And it'll always
But if it's not plugged in, it can't get electronic signals. Sorry.
Shut up. Because that's basically what V3 told you, shut up. It's just like, yeah, it's like some of the things they just straight up forgot how to do. Unless the thing was battery operated, I'm not saying how it still works. But I really like the show for what it was.
I like the show for what it was, and I will try to go back and rewatch it to enjoy it for what it is.
So if you would give it a rating, what would you give it?
If I don't put into account the fact that about all my personal crap about why I wasn't enjoying it as I watched it, I would maybe say a minimum 6.
I would give it I'd give it a 7 or 8 of V3s. I'd give it a 7 of V3s. I really liked it, and I hope everyone does, and going, I hope these reviews do make you want to go and watch.
Yeah, and I know we don't give spoiler warnings at the beginning of these videos because we feel like we don't have to because it's a review.
And it's old.
And it's valid point. 38 years, people. 30, 40 years. It's old.
Some of y'all, we weren't even born then. You got time.
So, and when we get to the later ones, I think we'll start giving spoiler warnings and that stuff because it's more recent and maybe they haven't gotten around to it, stuff like that. I would absolutely recommend that you watch anything that we review if you want to. If our reviews make you think you wouldn't like it, perfect. We save you the trouble by us doing it ourselves because we love you guys that much. But
love is a strong word. Like, we're not in that kind of relationship yet. Go ahead.
We get to 100 subscribers to love them.
Yeah, sure.
But also, for those who have been apparently watching our first episode over and over, thank you so much.
Yes.
To seeing those views counts go up. Please move on to the second episode. I know Sun Vulcan's hard to watch, but you don't have to look at it for very long. Always like and subscribe. Please tell us what you want to see. If you have any ideas of other content that you want us to release other than these reviews, we are welcome to hear it, and we are welcome to see if we can try anything out. We are looking to give you guys more than
just the Tokucast reviews every 2 weeks.
Every 2 weeks, and maybe even stuff with video, which we're still trying to figure out. I promise. You'll see our not beautiful faces.
Yes, and we will eventually make this into an actual podcast as well. Where we got that on lock.
On iTunes and everything, and we are working on everything. We're working on a new microphone. We're working on getting video. So please just bear with us. We're still figuring this out.
But we will say this is a lot of fun, and we just really enjoy just the response that we've gotten, across the various websites and things like that. But I guess from here on, join us again on April 23rd, a week neither one of us forgot existed, and for our review of Choudenshi Bioman.
And we might be bringing in guests, starting with future episodes, friends of us who also love these shows, people who have been showing their support, asking if they could be guests. We are looking into doing that as well if possible.
Yes.
So please, if you're interested in voicing your opinion, let us know in the comments. Let us know on our forum boards or our website. Please get in touch with us. We are waiting to hear from you.
Yep. All right. And once again, thank you again for coming with us on this journey of V3. This is the Tokucast signing out. Bye, everybody.
Bye.